and you can start whenever you're ready.
All right.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our special alcohol funding advisory board meeting. Really appreciate you joining us all on this Friday morning. Casey is with me, and she has a brief statement about kind of the Zoom meeting and how we're going to kind of conduct today's meeting. So I'll pass it off to Casey.
Great. First of all, good morning. My name is Casey Toomey, and I will be facilitating the Zoom video portion of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel. During the meeting, please mute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon found on the lower left-hand side of the Zoom menu next to the video icon. When you are muted, a red line will appear over the icon. Muting your microphone during the meeting will make it easier for everyone to hear. You'll have to remember to unmute if and when you want to speak. In some cases, I may mute or unmute people as needed. Each time you speak, please remember to state your name and title, as in board member, for the benefit of those listening remotely. In the menu, you can also turn your camera on or off by clicking the video icon. For the purposes of this public meeting, please keep your video on during the meeting. If you are participating by phone, you can click *6 to unmute your phone. For those using Zoom, somewhere on your screen, you will see a choice to toggle between speaker and gallery view. Speaker view shows the active speaker. Gallery view tiles all the meeting participants. Now I'll turn the meeting back over to Danielle.
All right, thank you. Danielle Bushcutter, and I'm going to say board liaison to help keep it a little more simplified. But Leah, I will turn the meeting over to you for our first agenda item, which is approval of the meeting minutes.
Thank you. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes, or can we take a minute to do so?
This is Joda, and I have reviewed them.
This is Peter. I've also reviewed them.
Any comments or changes to the minutes?
This is Peter. I did have a suggestion that Alice Lieberman was not present at the meeting. Otherwise, I found them just fine.
Good catch. Can we get the attendance corrected, team? Thank you.
Yes, this is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. If you want to just include that in your motion of approval, I noticed it this morning as well, so I apologize about that. A little late.
Thank you, and I forgot to be introducing myself. This is Leah with the board. So all in favor of approving the minutes with that corrected attendance, please say aye.
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 Opposed?
Chair, if I may, this is Casey Toomey, Assistant City Manager. For the
Oh, yes, thank you.
public record, can you do a roll call vote? Would that be possible?
Oh, sure. Do we just need everybody to say their name, or?
What would be helpful is if you could call the name and then have each person respond back with their vote. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Except you don't have the names.
Yes.
If you
Would you mind doing that, Danielle and Casey?
This is Casey Toomey, Assistant City Manager. If you open up the participant view on Zoom, it has a list of our members. Would that be helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Casey, that might be helpful, but I'd like to note that my name is not Rosalie.
Peter.
Oh, my name is Peter, for the record. I'm a board member.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Okay, this is Leah Roslin again. So do I do it like this, Danielle and Casey? So Joda, what do I say? Do I say if you're in favor, or how do you?
This is Casey Toomey, Assistant City Manager. So first, did we have a motion to approve the minutes? We would have
Yes.
somebody, okay, so then you would just say, call the roll, and you'd call a name, and then that person can just simply respond with either yes or no, or aye, or no, or nay. Is that
Thank you.
understood? Okay,
That is helpful. Thank you.
thank you. Sorry
Okay.
for thanks for everybody's patience as we go through this virtual environment.
Thank you for bearing with me. Okay, so call to roll. Peter,
Approved.
Ethan,
To membership. So added that residency language that's in that resolution, and then removed section 5 because this board was a standing board, so we didn't really need to identify the initial terms. Even though we changed the name of this board, the board membership remained the same. So really just some cleanup, and hopefully you won't have to see these for a while after this, unless you have any final recommendations you want to make to the commission related to changes.
any discussion? Okay. Seeing no discussion, is there a motion? Would anybody care to make a motion? Sorry, I keep forgetting to say my name. This is Leah, Chair.
This is Peter, board member. I move to approve.
Second?
This is Ethan. I'll second that.
Okay, this is Leah Roseland, Chair. Peter moved to approve and Ethan seconded. I'll go to call to roll. Ethan,
Ethan, board member, aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Joda,
Aye.
and this is Leah Roseland, Chair. Aye. So the motion passes. Okay, the second agenda item is to review Charter Ordinance number 33, which is linked in our agenda. Casey or Danielle, do one of you want to give us a rundown of this?
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. I would be happy to kind of go through this. I thought this was a good opportunity now that the board is specifically focusing on special alcohol dollars moving forward. We have one new board member, Ethan, which I forgot to ask him to introduce himself, so I may do that after I run through this. And just give everyone kind of an update on this charter ordinance that really is kind of at the foundation of the work that we're going to be doing moving forward. So most of it you can kind of scroll through. The part that I really wanted to focus on is section 2, which really outlines the purposes that special alcohol dollars can be used towards. So I'm not going to read it to you, but I'll try to give kind of the high level overview of each of those different areas. So excuse me. So the first one is prevention of alcoholism and drug abuse, including but not limited to education, counseling, informational activities, and other such related activities that is deemed appropriate. As well as B relates to detox-related activities. Section C identifies intervention or treatment-type activities. Section D is related to law enforcement, prosecution, court activities, and other related programs. So those are other areas that these dollars could be spent on. Section E is really about education, counseling, and information-related activities. F is related to prevention and intervention, which we talked quite a bit about with this board. And then section G is kind of that wrap up those other programs that are deemed appropriate by the governing body are also included. So these are really those key areas that will drive a lot of our discussion and funding discussions. And so I just wanted to make sure, I know we talk about this a lot and reference it a lot, but I just wanted to make sure that you all had it in front of you, as these are really those handful of items that Charter Ordinance 33 really identifies as our task in terms of making funding recommendations as a board. And then just wanted to give you all an opportunity to ask questions about this as well. I kind of skipped over some of the kind of history related to this, but with alcohol sales, there's a tax related to that. And so a third of those dollars goes into the special alcohol fund. A third of the dollars then goes into our general fund, and then the other third goes into our special recreation fund. So this is the language kind of governing those special alcohol dollars and how those can be spent, and you all are tasked with making recommendations related to that.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you. Any discussion or questions amongst the board? This is Leah Roseland, Chair again. I was wondering with staff if it might be possible to take what is on page 18, so essentially the list of programs that the funds can be used towards. If we could somehow make that into a checklist or attach it to the proposal review or application. So in other words, we're somehow operationalizing that and taking it and using it when we're reviewing and ranking proposals. I think that would be helpful, just so that we can make sure that we're really reviewing towards how the funds are intended to be used.
Great. This is Danielle Bushcutter, Staff Liaison. I think that is a great recommendation, and I think it will tie directly into one of our upcoming items, too, when we talk about the actual application and how we can hopefully fold this into that process much more effectively than I think we have done before. So thank you for that. That's very helpful, yes.
And it doesn't look like this needs approval or anything, correct? This is just sort of an FYI.
Danielle Bushcutter, Staff Liaison, that's correct, yes. So if there aren't any other questions, we can jump into the next item, which is where much more conversation, I think, will begin.
Okay, is the board ready to move on? Looks like it. Okay, so the third item is to review ordinance number 9726 and make a recommendation related to board membership.
All right, Danielle Bushcutter, Staff Liaison. I will go through this item as well. So at our last meeting back in February, you all had some really great discussion related to membership and requested that this ordinance be brought back to you all for review. And so as part of that discussion, you all talked about a little bit about adding some language related to some specific skill sets and perspectives that you were interested in having on the board moving forward. And so I've summarized those up. So the three different areas that were talked about were persons in recovery, persons providing direct services related to drug and alcohol treatment, prevention, and or intervention, and then persons in academia that study topics related to and are specifically related to drug and alcohol treatment, prevention, or intervention. So there was also discussion that it has been a challenge to get a fully staffed advisory board, so really wanted to look at, are there ways to add some language about those being preferences, but not necessarily having specific seats dedicated to those various functions. And so I wanted to provide you all 3 different things related to this item. So the first is the ordinance we used to have in place when this board was the Social Service Funding Advisory Board. And so that's Ordinance 8501. And I included that because in that ordinance, we did include language about specific qualifications or specific skill sets that the board was interested in having. So I wanted to kind of use that as a frame of reference that we have done this before. But then bring forward the resolution as it currently stands. And then finally, and this is where I'm hoping you all can really get into some discussion, then provided a version that actually makes a first go at some additional language related to the discussion that you all had. So we will go ahead and share screens quickly because I think it's a little bit easier to visualize it. But under that section that establishes membership, this version of the ordinance adds language that is, I'm gonna read the entire sentence so it's in context, but the board shall be comprised of no more than 7 members. The board shall be comprised of 1 member who is a United Way liaison and 6 members who are citizens of Lawrence at large, who have expertise or interest in treating, preventing, or intervening in drug and alcohol abuse. So that language in red is the language that has been added, and hopefully you all can have some discussion about whether or not you are interested in revising this language, whether you're interested in simply providing a letter to the City Commission stating that you're interested in having these perspectives, really getting some direction from you all about how you would like to proceed related to this particular topic.
This is Peter, a board member. Curious how you and Casey, Danielle, see this being used by people who might be selecting board members. Because, I look at this, and as I think of a mayor or a city commissioner who is deciding who might be appropriate to pull in, this seems like it's really a great location to give them a last push in the right direction that says we want someone who has expertise as well as interest in these matters. And if that's if you think I've got that process down right, then I really like this just for its simplicity and economy of space, but it seems appropriate.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you, Peter. Other discussion or thoughts with the board? This is Leah Roseland, Chair. It looks good to me. The only thing that I see that may not be fully transparent for members that weren't a part of the original conversation, missing the context about lived experience being a form of expertise. I'm just not sure if somebody reading this would sort of catch on that that's also a part of what we were talking about. So maybe even perhaps adding just like a comma, have expertise, comma, including lived experience, comma, or it could be done some other way. I don't think it needs like a whole, a whole other clause or anything, but just a way of denoting that. what are the thoughts of the other board members?
This is Ethan Belshie, board member. I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's important to call that out because I think that's an important perspective that we want to be intentional about nudging the decision maker towards.
Thank you, Ethan.
This is Peter, board member. That's very acceptable to me as well.
Thank you, Peter.
This is Joe.
Yeah.
This is Joda, board member. I think that's a really good idea to include that language.
This is Danielle, staff liaison. I want to make sure that I have it captured correctly. So we would update it to say who have experience, comma, including lived experiences, comma, or interest in, and then the rest of the language.
This is Peter. I believe it's expertise as well as lived experience, Danielle.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Okay, this is Leah Roseland, Chair. Would anybody like to make a motion? Or do we need to vote to approve this, Danielle?
Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. Yes, I would recommend a motion to forward this onto the City Commission, noting the changes that you all want to see reflected.
This is Ethan Belshie, board member. I would make such a motion.
This is Peter Carter, board member, second.
Okay, so moved by Ethan, seconded by Peter. Go to call to roll. Joda.
Aye. This is Joda. Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Ethan.
Aye.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Aye. So the motion passes. And let me go back to my agenda. Just scroll back up. I apologize. Sorry, friends. Okay. Agenda item number 4, review 2019 annual reports and provide direction on 2019 or 2020 annual report.
Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. It is provide direction on the 2019 annual report. So part of the task that you all are given as part of members of this board is to evaluate the use of city funds by recipients and report to the City Commission any such findings and determinations that you all deem appropriate. So this is our look back at all of the funding that was allocated in 2019. All of those agencies were required to submit an annual report on how they used those dollars to you all by February 15th. So that was just a couple days before your last board meeting. So this gives you all an opportunity to talk about all of those annual reports that hopefully you've had an opportunity to review, and then talk about, now that you've read all of the agency reports, what do you want your report to the City Commission to look like? So in the past, it's been very short and simple and to the point, and it has really been, yes, the agencies complied with the they have followed and complied with what they said they were going to do with the dollars that they actually spent. And I think we've also kind of highlighted some of those agencies that do a really good job of submitting some really useful information as well, just to kind of give them encouragement of those really, really well done reports that go above and beyond. So just wanted to give you all an opportunity to kind of have those discussions. So we are in that time of transition. So this annual report will include both the special alcohol dollars and the general fund dollars because that's what was allocated in 19. But hopefully this will give you guys a little bit of time to talk through those reports and anything that you liked, maybe some things we want to improve for next time, and then how we want to report that to the City Commission, or how you all want to report that to the City Commission.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you, Danielle. Have board members had a chance to review those reports, and would it be helpful to pull anything up on the screen to review? Sounds like we're good. Okay. So let's start first at just any thoughts or discussion about the reports that were submitted. What stuck out to folks?
This is Peter, board member. My overarching comment for pretty much everything was that generally I feel that the agencies accomplished what we hoped they would accomplish. Some of this bleeds into the discussion of how you demonstrate accomplishments and the differences between outputs and outcomes and those sorts of things, which gets into how we want the next application process to look. But overall, when you are dealing with this sort of thing, it's not a mechanistic process that you can just easily apply metrics to. So overall, I was pleased. I did notice that there weren't as many, I felt there weren't as many stories of the successes of individual agencies, which I thought sort of humanized the report. So, last year I was thinking there weren't enough metrics, and this year I'm thinking, wow, where's the human side of it? So I may just be a glasses half empty kind of guy. But anyway, I give overall, I think it was a thumbs up. So.
Thank you, Peter. Other thoughts or comments with the board?
This is Ethan Belshie, board member, and obviously I come to this with a little less context than everyone else, but looking through the reports, it seems like a lot of good work was done, and I would kind of echo what Peter said. It seemed like for the vast majority of the programs, they accomplished, or at least partially accomplished, what they said they would do. So seems like a good start to me.
Thank you.
This is Joda, board member. I agree with Peter also. I have always been most attracted and most empathetic to hear the personal stories. Numbers are good. Perhaps I just don't understand the numbers and just see the personal side of the applications, having worked with CASA and kids so many times, not nearly as much as Leah, of course, but I do like to hear the personal side. And I think that was one of the things I missed about the meeting that we were going to have. We were hoping to invite, I think, people to come and present a firsthand account. At one point we discussed that, I think. So yeah, I think they were great. Thanks.
Thank you, Joda. Yeah, and I might be perhaps on, sorry, this is Leah Roseland, Chair. I think that the reports are, I think that they struck a nice balance this year, actually. They didn't seem too cumbersome in terms of having to read and write a lot of narrative. I appreciate the sections with tables so we can quickly see sort of at a glance what was done. I think that for me, that's a helpful way to view things, is like charts or tables, particularly if it's like a list of activities. It just is easier to go through it when it's presented as like a table or a bulleted list rather than a narrative. But then the human piece at the beginning, I do appreciate when the agencies put in those personal stories of clients. It gives it a different context. I personally feel like the annual or year-end reports are in a good space right now. What changes or recommendations do the board members have for next year for any potential changes?
This is Peter, board member. Are we talking about recommended changes for the application process or for the annual report?
If Danielle, if it's okay, can we talk about any changes to the annual report just while we're looking at it and it's fresh in our mind, or is that jumping the gun?
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. I think if you want to go down that path a little bit, we can certainly do that. We will have to bring back a version for you all to approve at a future meeting. So I think if there are those key things that you're like, I don't want to forget this, we can note those when we bring that item back. So I think you can certainly do that. And then I would just jump into that conversation about what all do you want to share with the City Commission as well.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so are there any recommendations for changes that we want to note for next time?
Again, this is Peter, board member. I was satisfied, so I would not recommend changes, with the understanding that this discussion with the application kind of feeds the discussion with the annual report. But so I was pleased and wouldn't recommend changes at this point.
This is Joda. I agree also. It's so much easier to follow Peter's lead because he's a lot more thorough than I am. So, yeah, but no, I also agree. I think it did provide a pretty good balance.
This is Ethan Belshi. I agree. No recommended changes from me. Thank you.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you all. So what do we want to present to the commission? And Danielle, can you give us specifically, are you looking for, like, should we be picking out some highlights, or are you looking more, what specific recommendations would you like us to be making?
Great. Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. Thank you very much. I want to make sure, so in the past, we've really just said, we've walked through the process. Applicants were awarded funding here. As part of that process, they had to submit an annual report by this date. We note any agencies that were late in submitting that report, and there were a couple, but we basically note that, and then just will highlight the changes that were made to the annual application and leave it at that unless there's additional information. If you want to identify an agency that you think did really well, we can certainly include that. We've done that the last couple years, but if you want to keep it just high level, this was the process, these were the changes, we can also leave it at that. So I just want to get a sense from you all how high level or how detailed you want that to look, and we will bring that back to you all for review before it goes to the City Commission as well. So if you look at it and you go, you know, after reading it, I think we still want to add this, we can certainly do that as well. But I'll try to have that for you at our August meeting.
Thank you. Discussion.
This is Peter, board member. I think high level is fine at this point.
This is Joda. I agree. Given the circumstances right now with the COVID, having to do these Zoom meetings, it seems to me this is sufficient. And I think it gives the board enough, the commission enough information without, wasting a lot of time.
This is Ethan Belshie, board member. I would agree. I'm a little wary of calling out any specific program or anything right now. So I think it's fine to go high level.
There's Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I was just reviewing to see if there's a standardized way that we could present the information in terms of what it did for the community, because essentially I think that that's what I would like the commission to understand, is that these funds made this kind of change or it impacted this many people, and it's hard to get that big picture when you're reading individual reports. But without putting too much time in it, I'm not sure how that could be. Not all the reports have metrics. Some provide some outcomes, some provide some output, some just provide narrative. So there's not really a common way that I'm seeing to pull out that information. So going back to the previous discussion, maybe that's something that we can work towards for next year, is some common report, so that at least those numbers can be presented, whether it's this many people were served or there was this percentage of reduction, whatever it is. I think that would be impactful for the commission and for, this board to get a better understanding of. Is that it all clear for what Yeah.
This is Joda, and I think that's a really good idea to summarize and sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say simplify, but to summarize into one report that would, I think, expedite the commissioners in reviewing, and so that they don't have to review every single piece of paper. I think that's a really good idea. I think it would be very difficult to try to, as you say, come up with some sort of a form or a report that will provide that information as succinctly and as clearly as possible. I think that would be something we'd have to give a lot of thought to, and maybe consult with the commissioners and find out what they would find most helpful.
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. I think this conversation is really helpful because I do think there is that delicate balance between giving the commission enough information. I mean, it's one thing to say this is the process, the agencies met the terms outlined in the process, but it doesn't necessarily get to that, Leah, that second layer that you're talking about, which is really what impact do these dollars have on the community, and what are we using these dollars to fund and to support, and those important stories I think get lost a little bit in the high level, but we also have to balance that a little bit with the fact that we're funding close to 30 agencies, and so you don't necessarily want a one-pager on each of those agencies either, and so finding that kind of right balance between how do we want to present this information and doing it in a concise way. So I think there may be some opportunities as we look to 2020 to maybe add a question in there, because Leah, to your point, from a staff perspective, it's a lot easier to pull those numbers out of charts to put together a nice, this is how many people were served type of metric than it is to go through each of the applications and then follow up to see if the number that was in the application is actually the number that ended up happening in actuality. And in 2020, I think we're going to run into that issue even more because COVID happened. And so agencies are now having to adapt even more in terms of how they're providing these services. And so I think there's going to be some challenges that we're going to see in that. So I do think there's a nice balance there. So I think what I'm hearing is a general consensus maybe for 2019 to kind of maintain status quo. Let's talk about what we changed and maybe some highlights for what we want to do different in 2020, but then consider maybe a couple either additional questions or tweaking some questions for 2020 so that we can get more at that impact. Is that a fair assessment?
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Beautiful summary. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes, this is Joda, and I agree. Very well stated. Perfect.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Daniel, when will this be presented to the Commission?
Danielle Bushcutter, Staff Liaison. I will bring back, so we have our next regularly scheduled meeting. I think it's August 21st is the date that I have in my head, but that may also be a budget date. But late August, we have another meeting. So I will bring you all kind of a draft annual report for 2019 so that you can review it. And then whatever changes you want to make, we'll get those made and then forward it to a city commission meeting shortly thereafter. So it'll get moving pretty quick after our next meeting. But I think this gives me the direction I need to prepare that. So I don't know that we need any formal action from you all unless there's any final thoughts on it.
Great, thank you. This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Any final thoughts? Okay, let's move on to the fifth agenda item, review possible applications for 2021. Staff report.
All right, Danielle. Much of the talking this morning, but wanted to bring forward to you all some different application forms that other agencies are using. Special alcohol dollars are not new for the city of Lawrence. So wanted to really kind of tap into what some other agencies are doing. But some of the areas of conversations that we've had over the last couple meetings with you all is some discussion related to evidence-based outcomes, some discussion on identifying specific goals to actually include in the application and focus the application more on goals and outcomes that you all want to see achieved versus kind of having a question that gets at that. And then some discussion about asking applicants to present their requests to you all in person, which I think is a little bit more achievable now that we're dealing with significantly fewer applications, and then potentially to host on-site visits of board members as well. So those were some of the kind of key discussion areas that I pulled from the last couple meetings. As well as there was some discussion about having the health department come and present at one of our meetings to kind of talk about the goals and the data that they have and that they're seeing. With everything that has happened, I have not been able to get that scheduled, but it is something that moving forward, if you all are interested in, maybe in one of our meetings later this year, we can get that scheduled and moving forward, but something else I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of. So I included 5 different sample applications, and I included each of them for a little bit different reason. So I do not want to go through each of those question by question and talk about them. I'll talk at a high level why I kind of included each of them. So the first one is just our application from 2020 that we used in making recommendations. So the last number of years, we have really just kind of updated the years and we've called it good. We've changed, tweaked a few things here and there, but they've really been pretty minor adjustments. And so now that we're really just focusing on special alcohol, I think it gives us an opportunity, if we really want to make some changes to this application, to do that. We also had discussions about logic models, and so before we moved into the application that we've been using for the last several years, we actually moved away from logic models. So I included an application from 2016, which was the last time that we used logic models in our application process. So agencies who have been receiving funding for that long have seen this, have filled this out, have used it, but wanted to include that as well since there was discussion about logic models. And then I included the Manhattan application, so they too have they have special alcohol dollars that they allocate out. And one of the things that I really liked about this was it's quite a bit shorter than ours, but still pretty robust in terms of the amount of information. I think it does a good job of showing the comparisons from year to year. And I also think it does a good job of highlighting those different areas and categories that the program is intended to help with, whether that be treatment, prevention, intervention, education, whatever it is. I think they do a good job of kind of breaking it out into those different categories. And I also really liked in their application how they did their outcomes, which is towards the end of the application. But it provided more, I think, context. And so I really liked that as well. And then Coffeyville, I also included theirs. Theirs is a little bit shorter and structured a little bit different, but again, back to Leah's point at the beginning in terms of defining what is it we're trying to achieve, what are those outcomes and objectives we want to spend dollars towards improving upon. I think they do a really good job of kind of defining, when they say prevention, what does that look like? When they say treatment and recovery, what does that look like? And so I wanted to include it because I really liked kind of that component of it, and that it was tied very specifically to those intended purposes. And then finally, this isn't necessarily an application we could just pick up and use, but the health department has put together a health equity impact assessment. And so we've had some conversations as a board about equitably providing these services. And so I think there's an opportunity to maybe take a question or two from this impact assessment on equity and include that in the application. So maybe we can take a question or two from here if we want to use some of those others as kind of a framework. But I think there's some really good content here. If you all wanted to consider how can we include additional conversations and discussions about how can we provide these services, or how can we ask agencies to provide these services equitably. So that is my very high-level overview. I really hope this can be a place where we can spend some time. You all can spend some time as a board talking about what you like, what you don't like, and maybe providing some direction about the different applications and which one you may want to see used as a framework. And then we can kind of start making some changes and based on the discussion about things you want to include or not include, actually bring back kind of a draft for you all to review at a future meeting.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Wow, thank you so much for all that incredible work. I'm a nerd, so I get excited looking at things like that. So let's start with just sort of general discussion thoughts, and perhaps steer towards if you have a preference or a particular fondness for one or some of the aspects of the examples that Danielle showed. Just open it up for general discussion.
This is Joda. And I really like the Coffeyville one where they actually spell out, prevention, activities related to prevention of drug. And I mean, to me, it just gives more direction to not only the applicants, but to those of us who are still fumbling our way through the review process. It just provides us with some sort of measure to assess what it is that we're actually looking for. So I kind of like that, descriptions of, okay, this is what we want from you. And this would be really helpful. So I do like that Coffeyville part.
This is Peter Carter, a board member. Could I ask Danielle and Casey a question about the logic model? We did use it, and now we don't. And I'm curious why we turned away from it. And how did it work? How long did we have it? And why did we turn away?
This is Assistant City Manager Casey Toomey, and my recollection is the decision to move away from the logic model was somewhat because at one point there was an agency that the city provided funding to administer this alcohol funding program. And that agency administered the logic model. Does that track? So we paid, I believe it was DECA, to run the special alcohol program on behalf of the city. So we gave them an administrative fee. They collected the applications. They got the agencies together and helped them prepare this logic model. And then they brought all of that to the board for the board to review. At one point, the decision was made to save those dollars, those administrative dollars, so they could, instead of going towards administration, go towards direct service delivery. And so when that support from DECA wasn't there anymore, the capacity in the city organization to keep up the logic model and to provide the training needed to the agencies to produce that logic model weren't there. And so I think that's the point at which we moved away from using that logic model. That's my recollection, and I don't know, Leah, if you have heard any history with your time with the United Way about it, but that's kind of what I remember about the situation. I've been here for 17 years and haven't been real closely involved with the board. But the two systems I know are logic model, and then this every year we kind of tweak the application to try to get what the current board is looking for. So in terms of which is, was it successful or was it not successful? I think the stability was very successful. I think, when DECA was providing the administrative support, they had quarterly meetings of all of those agencies. So everybody was a little more coordinated, and that piece I think was very successful. I think that I also see the other side where the board had very specific desires to get certain information. And a recent example of that was kind of the financial piece, getting audits and that sort of information, and none of that was reflected in this logic model. And so it's just been kind of how does the particular board at any one given time determine what information they need to make their decisions, and then how do we design an application that collects that information? One last observation I would make is when this logic model was in place, the membership on the board, I think board members had a lot longer tenure, so they were very familiar with this model. Our new policy on advisory boards with term limits and some of our recent experience, we've had board members with shorter tenure, and so I think that too lended itself to moving away from the logic model. Was that getting at your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. And have you mentioned the idea of adjusting the application process yearly to suit the moving preferences of the board is exactly the whack-a-mole kind of issue that I want to avoid, is saying, hey guys, every year I want you to, go right and then wait, too far right, now let's go left. And because I find that I like the application that we are using more this year than I liked it last year. And part of that is because, to your point, Casey, I am more accustomed to wading through these things than I was last year. And so as I look for my interpretation of the outcomes, I find it more easily this year than I found it last year. And so some of this is tweaking the agencies that are applying for funding, and some of it is just waiting for those of us who are wading through all the paperwork to find our center. Joda, to your point, I also like Coffeyville. I really like the formatting of Manhattan, in that it would give you a simple goal and some space, and a simple comment and some space. And even though the process of filling out that form might have been just the same as other forms, it appeared more simple just as a result of the formatting. Okay, I'll step back. That's enough time. Thank you again.
This is Joda. And Peter, I was looking at the Manhattan too, and I agree with that. It just seems easier in some ways to look at, but particularly page 12, I think it was, where they're asking for funds. So for example, Heartland, I think Heartland also gets money from LMH, or at least did, or maybe DECA, I don't know. But it would be helpful to have, ways of breaking that down. How much money did you get from the city? How much money did you get from the county? And were there other sources of community funds that contributed to the budget? And I know this particular, this was it page 24? No. Let's see. Well, one of them that I was looking at, let's see here. Let me go back and find it. But anyway, I think they were actually in this particular page that I was looking at, where they were, talking about people served and whether there were duplications there. But, have the, here we go. I see this one on page 12. Individuals for all ages have been served by your agency. But also, I would be curious to know about money. How much money does Heartland, for example, get from the city, and how much from the county? And then are there other sources like LMH that provide assistance? Or, was there an agreement for them to do so at some point? I would find that very helpful, because it would help to assess just how much money we could award them. Does that make sense? Am I just babbling?
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Joda, can I make sure I'm understanding you correctly? So on page 12 of the Manhattan application, where it has the line items for agency structure and resources, I believe is the table you might be referencing, where it breaks down staff positions and the percentage of their salary that's covered through the funds. So are you saying that you would like beyond, that you like this model of breaking down by a line item where the program funds are coming from, including the positions, but not exclusively positions?
No, I was misreading that, although that might be
Okay.
interesting to know. I was misreading the number 5. It says have any duplicated individuals, and I projected funding sources there for some reason. I mean, I just wonder sometimes what the funding sources are for some of our constituents or some of our people who are actually applying. Are they getting money from different Douglas County and city sources? And that kind of helps to know just how much money we can try to expect them to be able to have to a certain extent. I don't know. Does that make sense to you? It seems to me that Heartland, for example, although I support Heartland, do they get money also from the county? Do they get money from the city? Is the county supposed to contribute as much? I think that information would be helpful to know as we kind of determine money going to to these organizations. I don't know. What's everybody else think? It seems to me that there's more money coming into some of these organizations, and it would be helpful to know just how much money they're getting from the county and from other organizations within our city. That's it.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you, Joda. It sounds to me like perhaps the intent behind that inquiry is wanting to make sure that essential programs do get funding, and wanting to get a sense of, if this board doesn't fund it, will it be covered elsewhere? Am I correct in that understanding of sort of your intent of wanting that information, Joda?
Yes, that is part of it entirely. I'm also curious to know if there have been any agreements in the past for other entities to support an organization, and if that has sort of gone by the wayside because the city is picking up so much of it. Can Heartland, for example, expect $15,000 from the city, and then the county is supposed to contribute $10,000 based on whatever agreements had been made? Maybe LMH was supposed to contribute $10,000. I mean, what is their commitment to Heartland, for example? I'm just using it as an example. I mean, what has been their agreement initially, and are they in fact fulfilling their part of it, so that Heartland actually gets the money, that as much money as they can, based on what the agreements were made when the agency was first established.
So this is Leah Roseland, Chair. A couple of thoughts about that. So one is, I would recommend having a standard budget form in the application. In that way, we can ask about other sources of funding for the program, which it seems to be one of the intent of Joda's comments. Which I agree, it's helpful to know sort of the how the whole program is being funded and how it's being supported, to get an idea of the big picture. I do want to be careful about asking agencies to really, how much time investment we're asking agencies to commit to this. And as a grant writer, knowing how much time it can take up to dig up that historical information, write narratives about it, and just the nature of grant funding is that even if For instance, LMH was designating funds or awarding funds to Heartland, just the example that you were using. Initially, there's rarely any commitments or obligation for long-term or ongoing funding. Generally, grants are awarded on a 1 to 3 year basis, for example. And so I don't think it's necessarily fair to look back at historical programmatic funding when we're looking at funding for the next fiscal year, is my thought.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. I appreciate that.
Chair,
Thank you, Jenna.
Chair, if I
Other
may,
thoughts?
this is Casey Toomey, Assistant City Manager. One thought that comes to my mind when I hear this conversation is there have been city commission conversations about funding agreements that have been in place between the city and agencies over the years. And so maybe staff could commit to doing, providing more information about kind of that perspective separate from the application. I mean, I guess you could have a question on that application about, are you aware of funding agreements that exist between the city and, you know, something along those lines. Or it could also just be more of a procedural part of the review of staff to, when we get the applications in, to say, okay, are there any agreements in place according to the city records that are relevant, that apply to these different applications? I don't know if that's helpful, but I wanted to make that offer, if it would be.
Yeah, this is Joda. That would be very helpful to know if there were any funding agreements and if those funding agreements are in fact being fulfilled. I mean, that would be very helpful.
Well, Assistant City Manager Casey Toomey, Danielle and I can put our brains together and see if we can come up with some way to incorporate that better into our process.
Great. Thank you very much. This is Joda. Thank you.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Yeah, thank you. That would be really helpful. I agree with the comments about the Manhattan application. It is very clear, it's easy to read, and forms like this are much quicker and easier to complete than long narrative forms. I think just at a glance, it gives us some of the high-level information that we're looking for, but still provides an opportunity to go into narrative and provide a little bit more depth. I mean, I think I could be nitpicky and picking out some tweaks, but overall, it sounds like the board is in favor of at least having some more, I don't know the word for it, I guess higher level sort of fill in the blanks or charts with some of that essential standardized data that we'd like to see across all applicants. Am I correct in that assessment, board?
This is Peter. That would certainly be acceptable, yeah.
This is Ethan, and I agree completely. Like, I even really liked on the Manhattan application, the little space where you can put the percentages for each type of program that the funding is going towards. I thought that would be really helpful, especially as we, you know, start looking at applications and stuff like that. But yeah, totally agree. Thank you.
I agree also. I like that one. And again, there are some things about the Coffeyville form that I like also. So.
Joda, this is Peter. What in particular did you like about the Coffeyville that you would like to have adopted into whatever it is that we're advocating?
I would really like just the descriptions, you know, I mean, for example, you know, general information and the alcohol and drug prevention, you know, what does that mean? Prevention, how is that supposed to be applied? Treatment and recovery, tell me exactly the treatment and recovery. I think that just helps give some guidance to people. And maybe these agencies certainly don't need it because they've filled this stuff out a million times, I'm sure. But just part of page 18 and the top of page 19, I just find that helpful to really kind of spell out exactly what I should be looking for. So maybe I need it for myself more than anything else. You know, sort of a preview of coming attractions.
Yeah, I think if it's clear for you, it's clear for others.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. It sounds to me like it would be helpful just to have some sort of standardized definitions available for the applicants and the reviewers and perhaps the commission.
This is Joda. Yeah, that's basically what, I mean, when I first jumped into this last year, I wasn't even sure what I was supposed to be looking for other than, you know, this is what they got last year. This is what they hope to get this year. And this is how they spent last year, and this is how they hope to spend this year. But I don't know, what are they really trying to do with that money? And if I see these definitions, you know, prevention, for example, and I've already read what prevention is described as, then I kind of can look at that and say, okay, this is how much they spent on prevention, and this is what prevention means to this company or to this agency. I would just find those definitions helpful.
This is Peter. I think, Joda, to your point, you know, the issue that I've always kind of struggled with in reading these things is again, you know, what good did you do? Demonstrate to us what you accomplished with the dollars that you've been given and how your clients have actually long-term benefited from what it is that you've done for them. And Joda, the reason I asked you the question about what specifically you like is because the more clear it is to us when we read it, the simpler the format, the easier the questions. Presumably, the less training it will take folks to properly fill these things out in a way that's transparent, not only to them, but to us when we're reviewing them. And to that point, that's really one of the strongest recommendations that I have toward just the spaced out, relatively easy formatting of the Manhattan application, and with some of the straightforward questions that, well, I thought the Manhattan application was pretty straightforward too. But looping back toward the beginning of all of this, the more times I look at it, the more transparent our existing form is to me. And what I don't want to do is chase after the new if our agencies are accustomed to filling out a format I don't want to reinvent their wheel every year is my, you know, these are good people who are doing great work. I can tell. I read their annual reports, and I just don't want to make it difficult for them to do what's really a secondary aspect of this. You know, their primary goal is to do good works, and if we throw them a complicated new form, are we helping them or hurting them? If it's a simple form, if the questions are straightforward and the formatting is easy, maybe we're doing them a favor.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you for those comments. And yeah, I agree with Peter that the goal of making it a simple process for the agencies. And although it might not be popular, that's one of the reasons that I am a fan of the logic model, is because it is a really simple way to convey, once you learn how to read and write a logic model, it's a really simple way in chart form to demonstrate sort of what we would otherwise be spending a lot of narrative in. So just summarize your activities, summarize how many people you're going to reach, summarize the change that's going to happen as a part of that. Another thing that helps me read and present information clearly and succinctly is just asking for SMART goals as well, so that we kind of have we know by when they're hoping to meet the goal, specifically what that is and the change that they want to see. I know that it can be a change if you're used to writing narrative and then you're asked to write things more sort of succinctly, then that is a change, but it's also it is also more simple. It presents the information in a way that's more clear for the reviewers, and in my mind takes less time for the applicants. But I don't think that it's exclusively presenting information that way. I think that some short narrative is good in telling the human side of the story. But in our application now, it is very narrative heavy. And that's why on the back end, since we're not asking for any standardized information, that's why in the back end of reports, we're not getting any standardized data that we can report out on, because we're not asking for it in the front end. So I think that, again, our attempt to make it easier on the agencies have to be balanced with the benefit to the community and our ability to report out the benefit.
This is Joda.
Peter, Leah. Go ahead, Joda. I'm sorry.
So you would actually prefer the logic model. You write a lot of grants, and so you're probably familiar with that. I wonder, to Peter's point, will that be simpler? And I also like to see some narrative. So, I mean, if we do a combination of the logic model, but include or request some, actual person, this is how we helped person A, and person A has had this outcome, just some sort of a, be able to actually humanize those numbers somehow. That's kind of what I would perceive as a good application. But I also understand Peter's point that our applicants are actually doing good work and they are accustomed to this form. So, as a person who has never had to fill out a grant form, I'm probably the most inexperienced of all of you. So I'm just making these off the cuff observations. So anyway, go ahead, Peter.
Well, my question, I had a question for Leah, and that was, the logic model, of course, the engineering side of me says, ooh, wow, we can get a table and we can measure something. But Casey was talking about when we had this in place before, that it required a certain amount of support and training. And I think that might be exactly what made it work well, was that there was someone who would hold the hand of the agencies and say, this is how you fill it out. And so it's that outside work that might have been what kept everything in a nice, neat format. So the logic model is good, but does that mean that somebody's got to step forward and train, as well as police a little bit, the process to get these things, aligned in their boxes so that it presents a nice, neat table at the end?
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Thank you for those comments. Yeah, and I was thinking that really, a logic model is just a visual representation of a series of simple questions that flow together to create a story. And I think sometimes the format is what hangs people up. And so if we just asked it as fill in the blank questions, took it out of the table format, asked those same questions and had fill in the blanks, it's actually very simple and intuitive.
Good answer.
Thank you. I did want to make sure, I see that we're coming up at a time boundary. And so I did want to make sure to circle back to and really express a gratitude and appreciation to Danielle for including the equity assessment, and would like to recommend that we infuse that in our process in some way, whether it's by taking some questions from that assessment and adding it into the application regarding, how they are, how their program is helping to reduce disparities, for example, or if it's an assessment that this board uses in reviewing the applications. But I do think it's important that we are really looking at how the funds are being used to foster equity in our community.
This is Ethan Belshie, board member, and I wholeheartedly agree with that recommendation. And I think that it might even be smart, I don't know how others feel about this, but asking applicants a question directly about equity and asking them to answer that question of how are they going to how their program will be administered equitably. Because I just think, especially now with the disparate impacts that we're seeing from COVID and everything else, I think now is the time that we need to make this intentional. And I think that should be something that we have in our mind as we're reviewing applications as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Other thoughts? Judah or Peter, do you have any thoughts about that and how that might be infused?
Personally, I think that it's a great idea because of this COVID and so much. My husband actually is a volunteer at Just Food and was shocked at how many people have been utilizing the services at Just Food, and to recognize just the inequities within our community, I think, has been certainly more visible to some of us who sort of kind of knew, but to see it actually happen is something that we do need to address as a community.
I vote yes.
Thank you all for your thoughts. Danielle and Casey, Leah Roseland Chair, is that enough guidance to get you started for next time, or what can we do to be of assistance at this point?
This is Danielle Bushcutter, board liaison. I think what I'm hearing is we like the format of the Manhattan application. We like the definitions in the Coffeyville application. We want to include equity, and to the extent we can include logic model type questions, that's also favorable. So why don't I put together something, and then you guys can at least react to it and try to take a little bit of each of those, put it into one new form that maybe is formatted a little bit easier in terms of being able to review it, and then we can talk about it at our next meeting, and you can tell me how close or not close that version gets us to what we want it to look like for 2021.
Beautiful summary. Thank you, Danielle.
Yes.
Leah Roseland here. Yeah, Peter, sorry.
This is Peter Carter. I have a question. Danielle, in the filling of these applications, do you get feedback from the agencies as to what their take on the applications has been. Will they say, "Oh my goodness, this year you turned the world upside down and shook it," or "Oh, this year I really thought that was much better than last year"? That's an important feedback loop that I don't want to discount.
That's an excellent question, Danielle Bushcutter, board chair, staff liaison. I don't know that we really have a good feedback loop in place, to be completely frank about it. I think the last time I really heard a lot from agencies was when we moved the form to an online form versus the email, the paper copy of the form. I think there was some transition there I think some people really, really liked it. I think some agencies kind of struggled with it, and we ran into kind of some technical difficulties as well. So I think that's really the last time I've heard from agencies, more than maybe one thing here or there. So I really don't know that we have a good feedback mechanism in place for that. We don't hold annual meetings with agencies. We don't really have that as part of our process, and I think a lot of other funders in our community do, and they're a lot better and more maybe intentional about meeting with agencies throughout the course of the year, and we have not done that, I think, to the same level. So I really have not heard much from agencies in terms of, I like this better or I don't like this as much. I think more what I hear is, I think consistency is an important thing that agencies like, because as you start to read through the applications year over year and agencies are applying for the same program, there's small changes that are made, but a lot of the application looks very similar. So I do think there's some appreciation of that, but outside of that, I haven't really heard much from agencies about the changes that we've made.
This is Peter. Is that something that we might want to change, or it sounds like that might be an important part of the feedback loop that could be addressed. Of course, I don't want to load you down with umpty gazillion more things to do in your life, but I'm curious if this isn't an opportunity.
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. I do think it would be beneficial. And I know in the past we have had kind of an applicant kickoff meeting sort of structure. And so I think if we do want to make changes to the application, that may be a really good opportunity to have a couple meetings that we have virtually that people can attend, and we can talk through the changes if we do make changes and those sorts of things, and have that dialogue that I think I agree. I do think it's missing, and I think we would benefit from it. I think agencies would benefit from it. I think it would be a couple hours really well spent.
This is Casey Toomey, Assistant City Manager. I might also suggest when we do come back with the application for you all to look at on your agenda, perhaps we could do a little bit more outreach to some of the agencies and ask that they participate and provide public comment at that particular meeting.
This is Joda, board member. I just think that's really a great idea to get some feedback from folks who are actually, trying to fill the thing out.
This is Leah Roseland, Chair. Yeah, I agree. And I wonder if, to provide some more context for the rest of the board, so the United Way in the city and county and the Douglas County Community Foundation meet regularly as the Douglas County Funders Collaborative. And we talk about sort of who we're funding, unmet needs, and how we can make the grant making process easier on organizations and better fill the social service needs of our community. And we have an upcoming meeting with the Human Services Coalition, of which most social service providers in the county are members of, to talk about funding. I believe that meeting is in September. So that might also be an opportunity for all the local funders to get feedback on the applications and process as we're talking about upcoming funding opportunities. It certainly is, I think, a value of all of us to get feedback from those agencies. And then the last comment I wanted to, or question, I guess, was the intent behind originally having the health department visit was to give us a sort of a better understanding about what the local needs are, how we could best be utilizing the funds to fill those needs. And I wonder if, I know the health department is like way over, they are saturated right now, but perhaps DECA, somebody would be able to join a meeting online and tell us what they see as the highest level needs, how COVID has changed that, how we can best be responding. It would be valuable for me to get a better understanding from those local experts.
This is Joda, board member. I think that's really a good idea. COVID is impacting people in ways that not only in, of course, food and rent, and I mean, there are a lot of psychological and drug-related dependencies that are being threatened right now too. So it would be helpful to find out, what resources they need and how they see COVID impacting our citizens and our community.
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. I can reach out to some of the folks at DECA that we work with and see if maybe for that August 21st meeting, if they would have anyone that might be available. I know that's kind of quick turnaround time. It just gives them a few weeks, but I'm thinking it may be important when we get to the calendar to maybe have a meeting in between the August and November meeting, so that we can have some of these discussions about changing the application and some of those items. I think it might be helpful to give people a little bit more time than a week to get prepared for some of that stuff. So I think I would make that recommendation when we get to that item to add an additional meeting if you all are willing and able to do so.
I think this is Peter Carter, board member. I think that's a great idea.
Leah Roseland, chair. Thank you. So what I heard is that Danielle is going to take all that amazing summary that she did, and she's going to put stuff together to present that we can provide some feedback for at the next meeting. Is there any other discussion before we move on? Okay. Okay, so any new business? Okay. Public comment? I don't believe.
Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. No one else is here with us.
Thank you. So going to the calendar then, our next meeting is August 21st, and then Danielle had recommended scheduling an October meeting if the board wants to go ahead and look at calendars. Is that what you'd like to do?
This is Danielle Bushcutter, staff liaison. We can either go through calendars now, or we can do the doodle poll option as well. In the interest of time, we may want to do that, and I can just send out a wide array. I'll try to keep the Friday morning meeting because we've talked about that a lot, but give you some Friday morning options throughout the month of September and October.
Sounds good. Thank you.
If I may, this is Assistant City Manager Casey Toomey. Just foreshadow or forewarn you all that those will likely still be Zoom meetings. So that's probably the way that we'll proceed, is to just go ahead and assume. Because of that assumption, we have one room where we have the ability to do all of the broadcast and everything. So we'll try to shoot for Friday mornings, but just wanted to let you all know that we've got lots of folks trying to use this room for different advisory boards. So just wanted to put that note out there.
Thank you. Okay, do we need a motion to adjourn?
I think that would be best.
Okay,
So moved.
second.
Seconded.
And roll to call. Ethan,
Aye.
Peter,
Aye.
Joda.
Aye.
Says Leah Roseland, aye. So adjourned at 10:10 is what I have.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank
friends.
you.
Great to see
Thank
you.
you. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.